And this is a book that is written by one of us here, Adora Sydney Jack, who is seated right here with us in the studio. She'll be telling us exactly what this book is all about and why she has chosen to title it with these 3 P's. Thank you and welcome. Thank you.
Adora,
how does it feel to be on the other side?
Good, yes, I was going to ask her. Good to see you on the other side. Now you are in the firing line.
Thank you. Good morning, Collie. Good morning, Cindy. Thank you for having me.
Okay. I'm looking at this book. I've been reading it, and it's quite interesting. This is another level of conversation. We just finished one, talking about one with Professor Michael Zekome, and here you talked about a number of issues. You've talked about politics, you've talked about gender issues, you've talked about power, how it is used in Nigeria. But I'd like to start from what informed your decision to put a book like this together, because it's a very, very interesting title that you've given it.
All right, thank you so much. And I think just going off your conversation, because I listened quite keenly on your last conversation and taking it into the context you've put it here. The conversation about Nigeria's politics is about the contestation of power and control. And for me, the first experience with that is when I ran elections in 2019 to represent my constituency, or Kigwe constituency, at the State Assembly. And
that's in Imo State,
in
right?
Imo State. And so that's what I call my baptism of fire. And getting into the circle, I began to study and unlearn and get a certain level of expose from what used to be my usual practical explanation from being a broadcast journalist to being in the field as a full-time politician. And what the unveiling did for me was the fact that there were 2 roles and 2 key stakeholders there. One, the followers, and then the leaders. And for me, I began to see that there was a lot of gapping. There was a lot of conversation lost between the leadership and the led. And so the yearning and aspirations of those at that structure, at that level, was totally different from the conversation happening at the center. And so there was a revisiting of thoughts. And so that's what happened in the process of getting involved, in the process of politicking, and the process of the narrative changing, and most especially being a woman in that space where there was a high level of misogyny and patriarchy. In fact, coming from a place where a woman hadn't run for that, level of office, and being the youngest in my party at that time to do that, it was, someone would say it was a daring adventure. So in that conversation, it brought the idea that we need to start documenting our experiences. First of all, telling the narrative from a competition, and also looking at the competitor's value in that space as a woman. And so that's why, all of this context, the idealism, the practical experience gave birth to the book.
Okay, so mine will be talking about the title for the book. Really, for the purpose of this discussion, we're having politics, X, and power. But I know that there have been publications about this book, really, because of the unveiling that is about to happen. And that doesn't seem to be the title there. So let's look at, what the interplay, that made you choose this title for this book.
Well, first of all, the narrative that seemingly is posted in the media and in the political context about women running is usually from the negative narrative. And encountering that, I first thought to myself, what would be the first trajectory in terms of trying to unveil those contexts that limit women, that frighten women, that push them behind, closed doors from speaking out about their purpose. And I looked at several terms, and I found that was the most, used context, the most used word to define women in all of their femininity. And for me, really, it's not just about the word. It's about, the interpretation of the word in the context in which it is used within the political space. And I think for me, that is what is defeatist. So in order for us to undo the negative gender identities, in order for us to unveil those contexts, remember, politics is about conflict and cooperation. And the only way we can actually look at the issue of cooperation is if we allow women to be in the space first, before we can even speak of cooperation. And so that title for me was not necessarily, to debase, the women nature, but also to unveil and for women to own, absolutely, to own their femininity and say, I am powerful as it is. And regardless of those contextions, I believe that we can redefine what it means in the eyes of such a political space.
Okay, but looking at the title, like Nkoli did say, the X there, what does it stand for?
Well, that's just the the purpose for the special edition for the book launch. If you saw previously, I mean, Nkoli was at the pre-launch event where we had the original book, the title, and the curiosity around the title gave the contexture of the conversations that we had. It was interesting, and a lot of men were curious to know why and what the conversation was about. But I can tell you that Ab Initio, even online, where the book is already previewed and it's on sale, the original title still persists. But you see, like I was asked this question on a sister platform, Focus, and I said to Dr. Amicha, I said, well, the truth is perhaps in our denial, in our betrayal of our thoughts, in the way our mind works. And I think that, in fact, the title most times is the curiosity that drives people to actually purchase the book. And when they do, they actually go to the chapter that speaks about the fee straight up without even going through. And when they go and they're like, this girl just scammed us. I mean, I don't know what they were expecting to see, but, it's a surprise.
Is there a nexus between the bespectacled pussycat that is on the back? Because I have a copy here, and I'm seeing a bespectacled pussycat holding a piece of paper as part of the cover of the book.
Yes, I think it's a tease, and in a certain way, yes, it raises your curiosity to think, what is it exactly is the P means for? What does it stand for? Is it the pussy in the boots? Is it the pussycat? So I think for a lot of people who are really artistic in nature, they will understand, the fact that there was some level of, curiosity woven around the artistic depiction using the cats, looking down at and if you look at the narrative with the figures down there, you will see a woman, you will see farmers, you will see agriculture. So it's really a deep contexture of what people are expecting to see in the book. But unfortunately, they were quite, I wouldn't say, well, maybe not pleasantly surprised when it didn't speak to their curiosity when they went to the page, unfortunately.
At least you made them read the book, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Something has to drag you to...
That's the whole idea.
It's a teaser.
All right, so, but in the book, you're talking about your power to transform as a woman.
Yeah.
You talked about, embracing your experience, as a woman. And you said it was a baptism of fire when you went into politics.
Yeah.
Really. Are you willing to go back, maybe after publishing this book, or you've run away finally?
Well, I wouldn't call it running away. I would call it, reinventing the wheel. And I think what I mean by that is that I think it comes a time when, it's not just about running the next election. It's about preparation and working with the next generation. And the conversation is to bring those experiences and influence conversations within the female space and begin to generate interest and continue to advise and explore women who continue to want to go into those spaces. And I dare say that it's going to be a tougher process in the 2027 election. So I'm also speaking with a lot of women in those spaces who are keen to want to also participate. Yesterday we had a very intense, intimate conversation at the British Council with a select women, audience who had run elections before, civil society members. And, you could see the trauma, you could see the process, you could see the pain, you could see the need for healing before getting back into the space. You needed to see the idea that women who are not empowered cannot even, go into sustainable politicking because it is highly financially inclusive. So we need to begin to look at those prospects and begin to, unveil them. Without that, it will still be a 360 degrees conversation. You have women who pick up ticket, never make it to the ballot, and so it's a case of she daring to run and never coming out, as an outcome, perhaps as a leading voice, as a governor or as a president or as a councillor. So we have the currency of numbers in women who have dared to run. What we are looking for is to push that narrative to women who have become. And that is the need for us for now to start the preparation, to start strategizing, to start lobbying, and perhaps looking at the constitution review that is ongoing, there has been consideration to review the bills that have failed, in the 9th Assembly. Perhaps if we look at quotering, perhaps if we look at, implementing the national gender policy as revised, maybe we will start to see legislation work for women. But as simple as it sounds for women's participation, it is, like I said, politics really is about cooperation and conflict. And whether women like it or not, we have to come to the table to revisit the ideals that champion our interests and lobby that through with the men.
Good. I want to quote from the book. I'm taking from page 34. I'm sure you will remember exactly once I tell you the page. And you said here that this cultural conditioning has woven a veil of shame, casting a shadow on the intrinsic beauty and power encapsulated within the female X. This is seen and observed in society. family, workplace as a corporate world, places of worship and politics, etc. You seemed to have been talking about the cultural relegation of the human female to just the level of procreation and homekeeping. And you were talking in just the next section to that, talking about redefining politics, breaking gender bias, and confronting corrupt perceptions. Now, I know that so much has been done in terms of breaking all of these biases, and I'd like to know what is the next frontier, because in spite of all that's been done, it doesn't seem to be enough yet. Like you said, we've seen daring to do, but becoming hasn't actually happened.
And I like the fact that you took it from that perspective, because I think that is one of the biggest issues we're still yet to unweave. And I say that because you see, there comes in the religious context, there comes in the tradition, there comes in culture, and that also is what unbirths stigma, stereotype, ethnic minorities come to play, the role of gender, and even marriage comes to play. So all those contexts, in the dynamics that we're speaking about, we need to revisit how we can look at socialization as an agent of education. And that comes from, the family, that comes from our institutions of worship. And I also like to say documentation. How many of the positive stories are we telling our young females? How many of those who were historians, are passing on the toga of the progressive females who did great work, the Margaret Echoes, the Dora Akunyili's? How are we telling the narrative? I believe that, yes, in the sing-song of what's not done and what needs to be done, we need to also put, side by side what women have achieved in doing. And that way we will be able to progress and pursue the narrative of the change that we need. Remember, Nigeria continues to sing this lullaby of how much, of an effort is making at, putting women in the space, but yet the numbers keep dwindling. So at last count, we saw that women's participation in parliament was about 4.1% in general. And you look at a country like Senegal, 57%, Rwanda, 67%, Ghana, as close as they are to us, at least 37%. So you continue to look at the numbers and the percentage. And the question that continues to happen for a country with a population of women at 49.9 million, and you're looking at the voters' population of women at 44.4 million voters. So that is almost more than half the fraction of the women population that we have. So how do we take that currency? How do we revisit the fact that first, even a voter's education and political idealism is local? And whether we like it or not, it is not just the act of politicking, it's also the issue of politricking, because I talked about it in my book, the issue of politics, and politics. When people ask, oh, so you're a politician, you want to run? I said, no, we are all politicians, because you help to make the decisions, you cast your vote, you express your thoughts, you revisit your pages online, and you express how you want governance to be done. It's all about the politics. So those who take up a ticket and dare to run are just trying to activate, the political process of power in that dilemma. So I dare say that, Kunle, that, for us to get back to that conversation, we have to use socialization as an agent from the barest minimum, which is the family, the institution, our worship centers, and in fact, even in our women groups as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've gone on both sides. You are from the media space. You have also tried politics. Let's see what it is for you as a woman from the conversations you had, because even though from your conversations, many people have failed, there are also some women, even though a few number, that have succeeded. So what was it that stood out for them, when you try to run, for a political office in the country as a woman? What attributes are you actually supposed to get to be able to, not be lured into what people think is why you're looking for power?
All right, so I'll just start a bit of a background. I mean, I'll start with a woman like, Simavo Bandrika of Sierra Leone, or rather of Sri Lanka, former Ceylon, who was the first prime minister. I know you remember Isabel, Perón of Argentina, where, of course, you saw the movie Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, emulated from, and, Vigitis of Iceland. And what I saw from these women is the act of preparation, the act of planning, and the act of service. Women must know that to be able to politically compete for people's voices, and not just because of selfish interest, is the fact that you must understand what the people want. You must understand what the space speaks about to you. You must understand the staying power and sustainability of power. It's when you can understand what it is you're there to do in the first place. So purpose, Nkoli, speaks to all of it. And I can tell you that that is why some of the great women have stood the test of time, regardless of the political brigandry and propaganda that seems to weave around them. I mean, we saw when Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was Minister of Finance, we saw all the trials and tribulations she had to go. She stood the test of ground. We saw Dora Akunyili. We saw the many of the great first. In fact, I take it right back to Margaret Atwood, the first female parliamentarian. We saw that she came from the social, civil society space, social movement space, then into the parliament, then into women mobilization, and the list is endless. So for women to be able to actively, come into that space and say, yes, this is the time where I wish to serve, they must understand the space they are going into. It is not just about becoming, it is the process of becoming. And so, when I see the conversation on mentorship, I really like to say that that is a keen way to get involved. The act of voluntarism, the act of internship, practical mentorship, active mentorship. And that, I think, for me, is the greatest way for young women and women to continue to pursue. But, when women get into the space without preparation and planning, what happens is that the suddenness and the abruptness of power can actually lure them on the other side. And so that what happens is that the fabric of character and value now places side by side, between power and those dynamics.
Okay. Adora, I've seen you've talked about all of these women. Joyce Banda of Malawi, Fatou Bensouda of the Gambia, Aminata Touré of Senegal. In the book, you did talk about your mom, too,
yeah.
Lady Ma Onyechere. And the question on my mind, really, I'm an advocate. I'm a women's advocate, no doubt about that. I grew up in the midst of women, so I feel a lot of the things that women feel.
Absolutely.
But the narrative really hasn't changed much over the years. And do you think that there is need for some kind of legal framework to open up the space for women? Because having covered a few political gatherings in the past, I know that the space is really very constricted for women, especially the married ones.
Well, I think that, again, that is the perhaps the agent of socialization and the, I say the albatross of sexism in our conversations, because then, I go to certain conversations and they say, how do women juggle, being mothers and, caring for children and, being leaders and being a parliamentarian? And I said, do you ask that to the men? I mean, do you get to ask a man, how does he become the speaker and then, be a father, drive to the parliament? How does he cope with, the children's after school homework? So I believe that, again, back to socialization, Kunle, what is good for the guest is good for the gander. However, it is how we lay the eggs in the first place, and I believe that what we can do is to start unlearning some of these ideals and some of these gender narratives that, mystify women's participation in election or in leadership. And then secondly, I also want to say that in terms of legislation, we go back to the issue of the quotering system. There is constitution review going on now, and we are hopeful, women groups are hopeful that in positioning the narrative, that perhaps not all the 5 gender bills will be revisited as we thought, but perhaps one key one that gives an inroad to women's affirmative action will be the call to the day to give more women seats at the parliament.
All right, so let's not beat this part. Where is this book, going to be unveiled? When? How? Who are expected?
All right, so it's going to be unveiled on 21st of March, which is on Thursday, at the Envoy Hotel. at the Embassy Hall, 11 a.m. and by invitation. And we have keynote speaker, Dr. Suleiman Abubakar, the DG of National Institute of Legislative and Democratic Studies, and the book reviewer would be Dr. Amina Salihu, Deputy Director of MacArthur Foundation. And we have special guests from the Senate President, amongst others. And one of the key, of course, my key guests and stakeholders will be women in that room as well. Absolutely.
Okay, but you've not told us the time.
The time is 11 a.m.
11 a.m.,
Yes.
okay. 21st March, Envoy Hotel at 11 a.m.
21st.
Yes, 21st.
Yeah, 21st of March.
Okay.
All right, Adora, we have to leave it at that. Thank you very much for coming on your show. It's good to have you on the other side today.
Thank you so much. And I'll dare say that the best power used is the best power given to a woman. Thank you.
Oh, that's a nice quote to end this discussion with. The best power given is the best power given, the power given to women. I hope you got that, and you have to take that in. All right, we've been speaking with Adora Sidney Jack, an author, a presenter who has also written a book titled Politics, Acts, and Power. I bet it's interesting for you to pick up that book and read it. It's already in Amazon, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And other
it's good.
platforms
Go
as
find
well.
X.
Yes, and find out what the X stands for. But we end with this because he said this book challenges the inexplicable symbolism of X as a symbol of vulnerability and subjectivity for women. Quite key for me there. Do have a great outing.
Thank you so much.
All the best, Adora.
Thank you, Kunle.